So in our passage, we meet Jesus's followers in a time after Jesus has spoken about betrayal, denial, grief, loss, and uncertainty. And in our verses, Jesus is responding to the disciples' fears and worries. Maybe some of those worries are worries and fears that we share too in different ways. What if I lose my way? What if there's no longer room or a place for me in God's family? What if I don't know what I'm doing? What if I struggle and I find faith and life hard? Jesus' answer seems to be, well, don't worry, it's kind of more simple than you think. Just come to me. Now, when we have a small group and we're exploring faith with young people and nobody really knows the answer, you can guarantee that someone will just pop up and shout, Jesus! And it's really, really difficult because you know they've only said that because they don't have another answer or because they hate awkward silences. But there's something in you that says, yes, but it's maybe a little bit more than that. But very rarely can we say, no, Jesus is not the answer. And so when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, Jesus is essentially saying, I am the answer. Whatever happens in life, whatever we face, Jesus says, I am the answer. And we've been doing all sorts of I ams, and they kind of are all leading up to this one. But that can sound a little bit wishy-washy, can't it? When life is hard, when we face really, really tough issues in front of us, we can sort of roll our eyes when somebody says something like that to us. If a starving child needs food and someone just doesn't do anything about it and just says, well, Jesus is the answer, then we might end up giving that classic Paddington Bear hard stare. And it's like Jesus saying, faith is much more than the stuff we know or the boxes we tick. It is absolutely the way that we live. A Bible verse that I came across the other day and just really breathed life into me was, in God we live, move and exist. Meaning basically in everything that we do, in everywhere that we go, God is. And we might know that maybe from our experiences and our relationship with God. We might know it because a Bible verse says it. But not only that, we are actually biologically built for everyday faith and life lived with God. And I'm going to share a little bit of some exciting stuff that I heard at the youth ministry conference last year by a youth worker called Mark Oestreicher. And this is, it might seem weird to be able to say, but an exciting biology lesson. I promise it's worth. Don't tune out. I promise it's worth it. So here we have a brain diagram. Don't switch off. I'm not clever enough to make this technical enough, so it will be worth it, I promise. So we have a brain diagram here, and I just need to talk you through three parts: the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, and the anterior cingulate. Now this is a little bit complicated, so let's just simplify it with colours and diagrams. So what we have here is the prefrontal cortex, which is the blue bit just here. This is the thinking centre. So this is how we think, how we measure risk, how we work out whether something is dangerous. So when it's hot, do I jump straight into the pool or do I check the depth? Do I check whose head I'm going to land on? Health and safety note, please do check whose head that you might land on. Next we have the amygdala, which is the green bit, also known as the fear centre. It often has the fight with the prefrontal logical cortex. And if you've ever watched a TV programme or a film where the baddie comes in or there's the scary bit and you still jump, that's because you logically know you're safe and you're okay, but actually there's something in you that is still fearful even then. So that's the little battle that goes on between the blue and the green bit. We then have the anterior cingulate. This is the orange bit here, and this is known as kind of the compassion and the kindness centre. This is all about relationships and how we care for each other and how we see others. So there was some research done by these two neurologists, these two brain researchers, neither of whom would consider themselves a Christian or really a person of faith, maybe someone maybe a little bit spiritual. And their research showed some really, really exciting things about how faith affects the brain. And they never really set out to prove this, but they came across a few things that they noticed. That whichever part of these three areas had been grown the most, that maybe you'd invested in the most generally in your life, affected how you understand and experience God, faith, and the world. So if you've grown and you've worked on your blue bit, the thinking centre, we think we can explain God. We can fit God into a box. Our church attendance is excellent, and following the rules is really, really important. If we've grown our green bit, that is the fear centre, and we probably have a really fear-based faith. So we're scared of messing up, of making God angry. Everything we do links to stopping God being angry with us, and our picture of God is just big, red, angry face. If the orange bit is the bit that we've worked on the most, the compassion and the kindness centre, this allows us to understand God as personal, as compassionate, and as separate from us. So I am not God, God is God. And we're also able to notice the needs of others and to act compassionately. So surely then the answer to all of this is, I really want to grow that orange bit of my brain. And so the question is, how can we grow that? Well, in all the research that they did, which involved loads of different things and activities that it wasn't really meant to be faith-based, they found two things that grow this orange bit, this compassion centre. And the first one was prayer and meditation. Now, this wasn't Bible study. It wasn't about bringing to God all that we already know about God, but it was taking time to soak in and listen and read and reflect on who God is and what God might be saying to us in this moment today. The second thing that they found grew this little orange bit was what they called faith-based singing, what we would know as singing worship songs. And they found that doing this 10 minutes a day grows this orange bit of your brain, the compassion centre, by 50% in 2 months. It grows it by 50% in 2 months. So how we see God as personal, how we see God as compassionate, how we make God God, how we notice the needs of others, how we act and provide a way of showing love in those moments, how we grow that part of our brain is by prayer, meditation, worship. It's about connection with God being part of our everyday lives, which is basically saying, how do we make Jesus our daily way, truth, and life, not out of duty, not out of knowledge collecting, not out of fear, but out of relationship and connection. The researchers said doing this once or twice a week actually did nothing in growing this orange bit. In other words, we're not built for destinations, job done, box tick, prayer said, song sung. We're built for a journey, we're built for a relationship, we're built for walking alongside God in the everyday. The disciples in our passage were scared. They were worried they would lose their way. They were worried they would lose their place. They were worried they would fail this test, that they would forget something they needed to know, and they would lose their place in God's family. And actually what Jesus says is, that's just kind of not how it works. Because you're just loved. And if you stick with me, and even when you struggle, I will stick with you. And it means that there's nothing in our lives that is outside of God's care, God's interest, and God's love. And so the question that we often hear in church all the time is, how can we grow our antingular singular? How might we grow this little orange bit of our brain so that our compassion and kindness centre is so big, so that we can know God personally, so that we can act compassionately, so that we can embrace Jesus as our daily way, truth, and life? How can we come to know him and become more like him? So well done for making through this bad, but hopefully really encouraging biology lesson. A star to you all.